It had rained all morning, the kind of rain that silenced the city, that made people linger a little longer in doorways, that made the world feel paused. Zara had spent the last few weeks numbing herself to Adrian's absence. She'd told herself over and over again that it was for the best, that she could finally focus, that silence was a gift. But that day, on that cold, wet morning, everything changed. The elevator chimed, loud, sharp, unbothered by the storm outside. Zara didn't look up at first. She was at her desk, typing up a project brief, trying to drown her thoughts in work. But then came the footsteps, heavy, intentional. And then the sound of a door swinging open, the door to his office. A door that had remained shut, untouched, for weeks. Her fingers froze on the keyboard. She looked up, and there he was, Adrian Knight, dripping rain onto the polished marble floor, his suit soaked at the shoulders, his expression unreadable. His jaw was tighter, his eyes darker, and something about the way he moved, sharp, commanding, distant, made her chest tighten. He didn't glance her way, not once, not even when she stood up, heart hammering against her ribs. He had come back, without warning, without a word, and now he was here, breathing the same air, filling the entire space with the storm he had brought in with him. The office was silent again, save for the soft tap of rain on the tall windows and the wild thud of Zara's heart. She sat back down slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she stared blankly at her screen. She couldn't focus. She couldn't breathe. She had imagined this moment 100 times, but she had never expected it to feel like this, like a knife sliding between her ribs, like every part of her that had tried to move on had just surrendered. Adrien didn't say a word to anyone for the rest of the day. He remained locked in his office, phone calls muted, blinds drawn. But Zara could feel him. She could feel him the way she felt thunder before it cracked, like the air had shifted, like something was about to give. And when she left the building that evening, soaked from the rain she hadn't bothered to avoid, she carried him with her. Zara curled up on the couch with a blanket wrapped around her like armor, a steaming mug of tea in her hands she barely tasted. The lights were dim, a soft instrumental playing from her phone speaker, but her thoughts were anything but calm. He was back. Adrian Knight was back, and he hadn't even looked at her. Her heart ached with questions. Where had he been? Why had he left like that? Did he think she hadn't noticed the silence he left behind? Did he think she hadn't sat up at night remembering the way he touched her, the way he kissed her, the way he made her feel like she was the only woman in the world, and then vanished like she meant nothing? She took a slow sip of tea, blinking away the burning behind her eyes. He didn't even look at me. But then again, wasn't that what he was good at? Making her feel everything without saying a word. Zara pulled her knees to her chest, resting her head against the back of the couch. Rain still fell outside, streaking the windows, mirroring the way her thoughts poured through her mind, messy, relentless, full of things she couldn't quite name. She told herself she hated him. She should hate him. But all she could think about was how the room felt when he walked back into it. Like oxygen after suffocation, like fire in a frozen world, like the first breath after drowning. Adrian Knight had returned, and whether he knew it or not, he'd brought her heart with him. The rain had stopped by morning, but the storm inside Zara hadn't. The weight of Adrian's return pressed against her chest like a secret no one had spoken about. He hadn't said anything, not about that night, not about disappearing, not about coming back. But his silence had a presence of its own. Loud, confusing, maddening. Still, work had to go on. Zara threw herself into her duties, pretending like her world hadn't shifted the moment he walked back into the building. She was seated at her desk in his outer office, calendar open, fingers flying across her keyboard as she organized his week, rescheduling meetings, preparing pitch decks, and coordinating his upcoming investor calls. If she couldn't stop thinking about him, at least she could make herself useful. She barely noticed when a junior staff member walked in, holding a large bouquet of lilies and white roses, arranged delicately in a crystal vase. The scent filled the room before the sight of it hit her. "Miss Benson," the intern beamed, "this was just delivered for you." Zara blinked. "For me?" The envelope tucked into the petals confirmed it. Liam. She recognized his handwriting even before she opened it. "Just a little something to brighten your day. Dinner still on for tonight?" Elle. Her cheeks flushed, not from the gesture, but from the sound of a door swinging open a second later. Adrien. He stood at the threshold, sharp in a slate-gray suit that hugged his broad shoulders like it was tailored by gods. He hadn't even looked at the flowers yet. His eyes were fixed on Zara until they flicked to the bouquet and lingered. The shift in his expression was so brief, most people would have missed it. But not Zara. She saw the flicker in his eyes, the tightness in his jaw, the cold curve of his mouth as he leaned against the door frame. "Well," he said, voice low and smooth, "it seems someone's finally gotten herself a man." Zara froze. He didn't sound happy. He didn't sound angry either, just unreadable. She forced a neutral smile, reaching for her pen. "It's just flowers." His eyes didn't leave the bouquet. "From your junior executive?" "Liam," she said quietly. "Yes." Adrien hummed. That was it. No comment, no expression, no trace of the man who had once held her like she was made of glass and fire. Just cold indifference. She watched him disappear into his office, the door clicking shut behind him. And all she could do was sit there and pretend her heart hadn't just broken a little more. What had that night meant to him? Had it just been a moment of weakness? A lapse in judgment? Or worse? Was it nothing at all? Because for her, it hadn't been nothing. That afternoon, after hours of indecision, Zara finally pulled out her phone. Her thumb hovered for a long second over Liam's name. "Can we talk?" His reply came minutes later. "Of course. Pick you up at 7? Dinner's on me." She stared at the screen for a long time before typing, "Okay." Liam was prompt, charming as ever. Dressed in a navy blue shirt and casual blazer, he met her outside her apartment with a warm smile and easy confidence. "You look beautiful," he said, opening the car door for her. "Thank you," she murmured, settling into the seat, her heart already conflicted. The restaurant was quiet and elegant, low lighting, soft jazz in the background, the kind of place people chose for real conversations. But as the night unfolded, Zara found herself slipping further into herself. Liam was trying. He asked questions, made her laugh, complimented her mind. But she felt disconnected, floating outside of her own body. At one point, he reached across the table, brushing his thumb across her hand. "You look distracted tonight. Everything okay?" Zara forced a smile. "Just tired, I guess." He tilted his head, searching her face. "Zara, are you sure you want to be here?" She opened her mouth, closed it, because the truth was, no. She didn't want to be there. Not because Liam wasn't kind, he was. Not because he didn't try, he did. But because her heart had made its choice long before her mind caught up. And her heart still beat for Adrien, the man who drove her crazy, who challenged her, teased her, broke her apart, and made her whole in the same breath. The man who hadn't said a word about their night together, yet still managed to occupy every corner of her mind. Liam leaned forward slightly. "Can I ask you something honest?" She nodded, slowly. He hesitated, then asked softly, "Is there someone else?" Zara's throat tightened. She looked down at her plate, pushing food around with her fork. "Yes, but it's complicated." Liam sat back in his chair, his expression falling, but he smiled anyway, gentle and understanding. He must be something. Zara glanced up, tears stinging the backs of her eyes. He is, even when I wish he wasn't. They finished dinner in silence after that. Liam didn't try to explain himself when he dropped her off. He only gave a small nod and a quiet goodbye. Because he had sensed it, right from the yacht party. The way her eyes always drifted elsewhere. The way her laugh never quite reached her eyes when he spoke. He had hoped, foolishly, maybe, that he could fight for love. But now, he knew. Zara walked back into her apartment, her heart heavy and aching. Because no matter how many flowers she received, no matter how sweet someone else was, all she could see, all she could feel, was Adrian Knight. Zara sat across from Ethan at their favorite cafe, the clink of spoons and soft hum of background chatter swirling around them like white noise. The scent of cinnamon rolls filled the air, but she couldn't taste a thing. She stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, her mind far from the table. Ethan, ever perceptive, tilted his head. "Okay, Spill. You've been zoning out like you're starring in your own dramatic telenovela." She sighed. "It's Adrien. Of course it is." He leaned back in his seat, arms crossed. So, what did the brooding billionaire do now? Zara hesitated. It's not what he did. It's what he didn't do. He hasn't said a word. Not about the night, not about leaving, not even about me. Her voice grew softer with each word. And I hate that I care. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Zara, honey, you clearly do care. You haven't shut up about him in weeks." "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "What if he doesn't see me the same way? What if I'm just a staff member he happened to sleep with?" Ethan rolled his eyes and leaned in. "Or what if he does like you and doesn't know how to show it? Men are not that emotionally evolved, babe. Sometimes they're just idiots with good suits and deep voices." Zara laughed in spite of herself. He continued, eyes shining with mischief. "Maybe he's waiting for you to walk up to him and say, 'Hey, Knight, I like you. Deal with it.'" She groaned, hiding her face. "Ethan." He shrugged. "What? It's better than bottling everything up and dying slowly inside?" Later that day, needing a break from the confusion clouding her mind, Zara slipped out of the office and ducked into the cafe across the street for a quick coffee. It was quiet, the late afternoon sun streaming lazily through the windows. She was waiting for her order when she heard it, Adrian's voice. Not the calm, measured one she was used to. This one was angry, raw. "No, I told you I'm not signing off on that. I don't care what the board thinks. Just don't twist my words again." Zara turned subtly, just enough to see him near the back corner of the cafe, phone clutched tightly in his hand, his jaw tight, eyes blazing. She couldn't hear everything, but the tension in his voice was like static in the air. He wasn't just angry. He was unraveling. That wasn't like Adrien at all. That evening, the city wore a quiet sadness. The skies were gray, heavy with clouds that couldn't decide whether to rain or hold back. Zara had left the building late, her heels clicking softly against the pavement as she rounded the corner from the front steps of the office. She stopped in her tracks, parked just across the road, under the shade of a dying jacaranda tree, was his car. Adrien's sleek black BMW engine off. Windows fogged slightly from the chill in the air, and through the glass, she could just barely make out his silhouette. Still, slouched, hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing anchoring him to the moment. Zara's heart sank. He hadn't even gone home. He'd come straight here, and never stepped out. She didn't know what made her cross the road, what made her walk up and tap lightly on his window, but something in her chest tugged too hard to ignore. Adrien flinched. Slowly, his head turned. For a few seconds, he stared at her like he couldn't quite place where he was, like she'd startled him out of a very deep, very dark thought. Zara offered a tentative smile. "Hi." He nodded once, slowly, then rolled down the window but didn't say anything. "You okay?" she asked gently. A beat passed, then another. "I don't know," he said honestly. Something in her chest cracked. He looked exhausted, hollow, a man who'd held the world too tightly for too long. "I live just 10 minutes away," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You don't look like you should be driving around like this. Come stay for a bit. Clear your head." Adrien didn't argue. He just unlocked the door. The drive was quiet. Zara could barely look at him without worrying. His hand gripped the gear like he was holding back an earthquake, jaw locked, gaze distant. He didn't ask where they were going. He didn't speak. And still, there was something grounding about his presence beside her. Something familiar. When they reached her apartment, she handed him a clean towel and gestured toward the bathroom. He didn't question her, just moved like a man too tired to resist kindness. She tossed a hoodie onto the bed for him, one of hers, oversized and soft, and stepped into the kitchen. Dinner was simple: spaghetti, stir-fried peppers, and ginger tea. She wasn't trying to impress him. She was trying to bring him back to himself. One smell, one bite, one moment at a time. She kept her voice light, easy. "Do you remember the pitch in Dubai? You spent the whole flight working and still managed to charm the hotel manager into upgrading us to the presidential suite." He didn't respond, but she saw the corner of his mouth twitch. Encouraged, she went on. "And that time you yelled at me for missing a margin in the budget and then bought me a coffee the next day because you don't like grudges in the workplace?" She turned to see him standing in the doorway now, hoodie on, leaning against the frame. He looked different. Not powerful, not composed, but human. Vulnerable in a way she wasn't used to seeing. "Zara," he said finally, his voice low and rough. "Why are you being nice to me?" She blinked. "Because you look like you're trying hard not to fall apart." He looked at her for a long time, his eyes unreadable. Then finally, he walked in and sat down at the small kitchen table. "I didn't expect to end up here," he muttered. Zara sat across from him, gently placing his plate in front of him. "Neither did I." They ate in silence for a while. She kept the conversation easy, asked about his trip, told him about a funny moment with Ethan at the office, recapped an investor call that had gone awkwardly but turned out fine. But she watched him closely. He was listening, but he wasn't there. His mind was far away. "Whatever it is," she said softly, "you can talk about it. Or not. But you don't have to sit in your car alone again." He looked up slowly, eyes meeting hers. And in that moment, she wasn't his employee. She was just a girl who cared. The clink of forks had gone quiet. The ginger tea sat half-sipped. And for the first time in hours, Adrien wasn't trying to carry the weight of silence like a badge. He just stared down at his plate, elbows on the table, fingers tangled as if holding them tightly would stop his thoughts from spilling out. Zara didn't rush him. She just sat across from him, chin resting on her palm, eyes steady. She waited. And finally, he exhaled. A sound too heavy for someone who'd spent a lifetime pretending nothing ever touched him. "I've made a mess of things," he said quietly, "and I don't mean the kind that gets cleaned up with an apology email or a handshake." Zara didn't speak. Not yet. Adrien leaned back in the chair, the hoodie sleeves pushed up to his forearms, revealing the tension in his veins. "You know, people always think it's impossible for a guy like me to be broken, to be cheated on, to be left." Zara blinked. That wasn't what she expected to hear. "But I was," he continued, eyes fixed on some point past her, over and over again, by the same person. And like an idiot, I kept going back. Zara's brow furrowed, surprised. "You?" Adrien gave a small, bitter laugh. "Yeah. Shocking, right? Adrian Knight. The guy who always has women hovering around him like bees to honey. The guy with the suit and the corner office and the arrogance so thick it could clog a drain, cheated on, lied to, and worse, too proud to admit he stayed anyway. Zara's lips parted, but the words didn't come. She'd never imagined him this way, cracked, unguarded. But here he was, not Adrien the CEO, just Adrien, a man still bleeding beneath his armor. I thought if I could control everything else, my company, my image, my reputation, maybe it would balance out the chaos in my personal life, he continued. But the truth is, I lost control a long time ago. I just got really good at pretending. His voice grew quieter but heavier. She pushed me, emotionally, mentally, manipulated the hell out of me, and when she got caught, she'd cry, say I was cold, say I deserved it. I started thinking maybe she was right. Zara's chest tightened. That's not love, Adrien. I know that now, he said, forcing a humorless smile. But back then, I thought maybe if I fought harder, worked harder, she'd stop. I kept trying to fix it, fix her, fix us. And every time I thought we were healing, she was already somewhere else, doing it again. Zara sat forward, eyes locked on his. So, you left? I left, he nodded. Finally, walked out with nothing but a suitcase and my dignity halfway shredded. I swore I'd never let anyone get close again, and for a while I didn't. Then came the part that made his gaze drop. Until you, he said, voice nearly a whisper. Zara froze, heart stuttering. I didn't mean to let you in. It wasn't part of the plan. You were supposed to be the sharp, annoying assistant who rolled her eyes when I nitpicked your designs. You were supposed to file reports, pitch ideas, and go home. But then you started noticing things, like the way I only smiled with one side of my mouth when I was trying to fake calm, or the way I drank espresso only when I was trying not to scream. He looked up at her then, truly looked, and it terrified me. Because you weren't just under my skin. You were starting to see me. Really see me. Zara's lips parted, her voice soft. So that's why you pushed me away? He nodded once. That, and because I knew I'd screw it up. And I did. Those nights in the apartment when you could hear, when you thought I was sleeping with half the city, I wasn't. Not after that first week. But I didn't correct it. I let you believe what you wanted. Maybe part of me wanted to punish you for getting too close. Maybe part of me was just scared you'd see the truth and leave anyway. He chuckled bitterly. And I hated the way you looked at me after that, like I was just another man with a revolving door and no emotional capacity. Zara's heart twisted. She remembered those nights, the muffled laughter, the footsteps, the perfume that wasn't hers. She remembered the way her chest ached and how she told herself it didn't matter because he wasn't hers. You reminded me of her, he said suddenly, surprising them both. Not in the bad ways, in the good ones, the ones that hurt to remember. You reminded me of what I thought love could have been, if it hadn't been poisoned. So I tried to bury it, tried to ignore how my stomach flipped every time you stood too close, or challenged me in meetings, or stayed up all night working just to impress me. He leaned forward then, elbows on the table, his gaze steady. But I couldn't ignore it. Not in the club, not that night in the hotel, and definitely not when you walked away with another man on your arm and smiled like I wasn't already drowning. Zara swallowed hard. Why didn't you say something? He sighed. Because I didn't want to be the guy who pulled you into his broken world. I didn't want to taint the only genuine thing I'd felt in years. I thought, if I stayed away long enough, maybe I'd forget. He let out a shaky breath. But I didn't, and I can't. Zara's chest felt too tight. Her heart pressed against her ribs like it was begging for air. This was the part where she was supposed to say something, anything. But her throat was thick with everything she hadn't dared hope he felt. I'm not perfect, Zara, Adrien said, voice softer now. I never will be, but I'm trying. And maybe I'm not the kind of guy who says all the right things. But I see you, and I feel everything I've tried to deny. And if you still see anything in me worth trusting, worth trying, then I'll be here. If not, I'll walk. No pressure, no games." She stared at him. The man everyone believed was made of marble, and fire was sitting in her kitchen, warm tea in front of him, asking for something as fragile and human as love. And in that moment, Zara realized she had never seen him more clearly. The silence after his words stretched like a taut string between them, fragile, delicate, and full of things unsaid. Adrian's eyes were still on her, unreadable now, as though afraid he'd already gone too far, that he'd peeled himself open, only to be met with nothing in return. But Zara wasn't silent because she had nothing to say. She was silent because she felt everything, all at once. She rose slowly from her seat, walked to the kitchen counter, and poured herself water, more to buy time than because she was thirsty. Her hand trembled just slightly. "I never expected you to say any of that," she said finally, her voice measured but soft. Adrien didn't respond. He just watched her like he was waiting for the sentence that would crush him. Zara turned back to face him, her fingers wrapped tightly around the glass. "You think I looked at you like you were just another man?" she asked, her brows drawing together. "Adrien, I was pretending not to look at you at all." His expression flickered. Surprise, confusion, something warmer, breaking through the guarded edges. "I didn't hate you," she said, stepping closer. "I told myself I did. I told myself you were arrogant, annoying, cold. I told myself you were the kind of man who collected women like suits and threw them out with the laundry. And the worst part?" She paused, pressing her lips together. "I said all those things not because I believed them, but because I was terrified that if I let myself feel what I really felt, I'd get hurt." She sank back down into the chair across from him, and for the first time since he walked into her apartment, really looked at him. "You don't know how hard I tried to ignore you. At work, at home, in the elevator at 2 a.m., when I heard your footsteps outside my room. I tried so hard not to want you." Adrian's throat moved as he swallowed slowly, saying nothing. "Then, that night happened," she went on. "And everything I buried came crashing through, and after that, you left. You didn't say a word, and I thought, well, that's what I get for being the girl who fell for her boss." Adrien leaned forward, his voice low. "Zara," but she shook her head gently. "Let me finish." He nodded. She laughed, just a little, biting, ironic. "And then came the parade of silent mornings. You were suddenly distant, controlled, cold again. I thought maybe I'd imagined the way you kissed me. Maybe I'd built something out of nothing. And when I saw those girls, I told myself, see, he's already moved on. You were just one night. You don't matter." She blinked away the sting behind her eyes. "So I tried Liam. I thought maybe, if I let myself go there, I could forget you. But all I could see, all I could feel, was you." Adrien reached across the table, resting his hand carefully over hers. She didn't pull away. "I thought I was protecting you," he whispered, "by pulling away, but I ended up hurting both of us." Zara smiled sadly. "You're not the only one with walls, Knight." They stayed like that for a moment, his hand over hers, her heart pounding in her chest like a drum beat that had been waiting for this rhythm all along. "Adrien?" she asked quietly. "Yeah? That night, was it real for you?" He didn't blink, didn't hesitate. "More real than anything I've had in a long time." She nodded slowly, her breath catching. "Then stay." Adrien looked up, brow furrowed. "What?" She squeezed his hand. "Stay tonight. Not because you're lost. Not because you're escaping something. But because maybe you finally found something worth staying for." He stared at her like she was the only steady thing in a world that kept shifting. and for the first time in a long time. Adrian Knight smiled without pretending. Zara let her fingers trace the rim of her teacup as silence stretched again between them. But this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was thick, heavy with thought. She glanced at Adrien, at the way his jaw flexed every few seconds, like he was chewing back something he still hadn't said. And then, in a soft, steady voice, she said what had been sitting in her chest for weeks. "You don't have to heal by doing the same thing that broke you." Adrian's gaze snapped to hers, surprised, caught. She didn't flinch. Sleeping around, pretending not to feel anything, numbing it out with bodies and noise, it doesn't fix the ache. You know that, right? He didn't speak, but the weight of her words settled into the room like dust that had always been there. "I used to think love was just about surviving someone else's mistakes," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "That if you stayed long enough, forgave enough, tolerated enough, you'd earn the happy ending. But love isn't meant to be punishment. It's not something you prove by suffering." Adrian's eyes softened, and he leaned back slightly, watching her like he was seeing something he hadn't dared look at too closely before. "I learned the hard way," she went on, "that when someone cheats on you, when they lie to your face and still expect you to show up with open arms, that's not love. That's manipulation. That's control. And walking away isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do." He nodded once, slowly. "I didn't know how to leave. Not until it felt like I couldn't breathe." Zara reached across the table, her fingers brushing gently against his. "You breathe easier now?" He stared at their hands for a long moment. "Only when I'm with you." Her breath caught in her throat. There was a beat of silence, the kind that danced just on the edge of something more. Zara stood and walked over to him, slowly, cautiously, as if afraid the moment might dissolve if she moved too fast. She stood between his knees as he sat in the chair, her fingers brushing the edge of his hoodie. Her voice was softer now, but honest. "I never needed you to be perfect, Adrien. Just honest. Just here." He reached up and tucked a curl behind her ear, the intimacy of the gesture making her knees weaken slightly. Zara stood and walked over to him, slowly, cautiously, as if afraid the moment might dissolve if she moved too fast. She stood between his knees as he sat in the chair, her fingers brushing the edge of his hoodie. Her voice was softer now, but honest. "I never needed you to be perfect, Adrien. Just honest. Just here." He reached up and tucked a curl behind her ear, the intimacy of the gesture making her knees weaken slightly. Zara leaned down, lips hovering over his, barely touching, almost trembling. Their breath mingled. His hand slid to the back of her neck. Her lips brushed his, just once, then again, a little firmer, more certain. But before it deepened, Zara paused. She pulled back slightly, her breath still unsteady, eyes flickering across his face. Adrian's brows furrowed, his hand still gently holding the side of her neck. "What's wrong?" She swallowed, her voice quiet but steady. "I don't want to be another escape." He blinked, caught off guard by her honesty. "I know what it feels like to use something, someone, as a distraction," she continued. "And I can't do that. Not with you. If this means something, I need to be sure we're not just reaching for each other because it's easy or familiar." Adrien sat still, his chest rising slowly, the weight of her words settling in. Her gaze softened, but it didn't waver. "You're hurting. I'm still healing. And as much as I want this, I do. I can't be a reaction to your pain." Adrien exhaled, a mix of frustration and admiration in his eyes. "Zara." But she shook her head gently. "Not like this." He rested his forehead against hers, his fingers brushing lightly down her arms. "You're right." Zara looked into his eyes, and in them she saw something she hadn't before. Not just desire or guilt or longing, but restraint. the kind that comes from truly wanting to do things right. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice low, firm. "This time, I'll wait." She gave a soft, breathless laugh. "You? Waiting? I'll believe it when I see it." He smiled, just slightly. "Then stay close, you won't miss it." Zara let herself lean into his shoulder, feeling the way his arms wrapped around her, not to possess her, not to pull her in, but to simply hold. Just that. No expectations. And in that moment she realized, sometimes love isn't loud. Sometimes it's the quiet promise in the space between what you want and what you know you need to wait for. If this story moved you even just a little, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep creating emotional, relatable, and unforgettable stories like this one. Let's get this story viral, so more people can feel, cry, and heal right along with us. Every like and share pushes us to keep going, and every comment inspires the next chapter. Thank you for being part of this journey.